China has been able to play the mainstream media in a way that we haven't seen before.
Absolutely. I personally have always linked that whole idea back to what we started talking about, nicknames and who's bald and who's not, who's fat and who's not, that kind of thing. And I was thinking how to present this idea to the room, that words do matter. Absolutely matter. They have to matter because that's how we express ourselves, how we say things that we're thinking, meaning, whatever. And so words do matter. But as a mother, all those years ago when my kids were really quite wee, I instigated a rule in our family that name calling is just out of the question. So you couldn't call your sibling fatty, thinny, scaredy cat, even innocuous things so-called like that. And therefore, because I felt it was important to prepare my kids who are biracial for the potential difficulties they would encounter when they went out to school or wherever. And sure enough, I've noticed in schools that, certain schools anyway, that the idea of calling their peers by nicknames was highly popular and really, in a lot of ways, harmful and hurtful, unnecessary, and definitely prejudiced. And so it just reinforced to me that whole notion that name calling is just out of the question. One foot on that slippery slope leads you to nasty, nasty names and very difficult social conditions. And that to me is fundamentally wrong. And it has connections with fake news, fake media, fake whatever you want to call it that's happening today. As a parent, I don't know how you feel about that, but certainly it has been and still continues to be very important to me and in my family to a large extent.
How do you inoculate against that sort of sensitivity without having some sort of, I don't know what to call it, exposure therapy or some sort of, like, what principles would you instill, Pat, or have you instilled in your kids that have allowed them to be resilient in the way that Tyler has described? You know, he says, you can say whatever you want about me, but if you fuck with journalism, then we have a problem. So I like that perspective. That's very, like, disconnected, but I think very few people have that capability.
You're absolutely right, and it's a principle that I've tried to uphold and to sort of practice with my kids and with others in my network as such. But it is very subjective because I can want to induce that, impose that, but my children had peers to deal with, and one particular child did end up allowing himself to be called by a nickname. The second child didn't, always insisted that his name was his name was his name. And so, it depends on peer pressure. And I think you're right, Eric, Io, that there is an issue there. So it's not just about me and whatever standards I want to impose. It's how it relates to everybody else and how other people respond too. Same goes with the media. The thing is, I feel you've got to start somewhere. You've got to make a stand, and you might not achieve very much, but hey, that's okay.
Okay. Just real quickly, Anna Marie found a fantastic related article I want to touch on, but I'll tee it up by sharing my own personal anecdote of, which I've done before, so pardon if you've heard it before. Although no one's heard this part before. When I was 1 and 2 years old, I'm told by my parents that I had a real difficulty with flatulence as a very young child. And it earned me the nickname Little Toot. And that somehow evolved into Stinky around 2 or 3 years old. I don't have any real memory of being called these words, but that's what my parents referred to me as Little Toot and Stinky and whatever. And my point is, as I grew up, through my entire life, whatever the most embarrassing thing that was happening to me became my nickname. And they would go to extremes to try and reveal the most embarrassing thing possible and make a joke of a name out of it and try to attach it to me my entire life. And I, I find myself doing this to other younger family members, where a young cousin or nephew or whatever, niece or nephews and whatnot, and I'll jokingly, lovingly say, "Oh, you're crazy. You're so crazy. You're so crazy." And I want them to associate me calling them crazy with, and I want them to embrace it and almost develop a sort of pride in their uniqueness of their craziness. And I, as an example of being able to, when somebody's calling you a name, I do. It sounds strange, but when somebody starts calling me names or whatever, I literally smile, almost in a psychopath kind of way, because it reminds me of all of my relatives who tried to play this crazy game with me, where they tried to come up with a crazy, this kind of thing, and it just made me not only immune, but I get a weird sort of type of variation of joy when somebody's trying to insult me. I literally enjoy it. I know that's strange, but I wish that on everybody. I wish I could give that superpower to everybody. So
That sounds very Spartan-like.
I don't know. There's obviously some better corollaries, examples, analogies that some cultures must do to gang members beat up each other. To I don't know, whatever. But so the article that I want to refer to that Anna Marie found is that Dave Chappelle, who more than anybody dabbles in this area professionally, masterfully, perhaps the best who's ever done it, and he has been dancing on this cliff edge, which is what comedians are supposed to do, the good ones, anyways, and has been dancing on the cancellation cliff for a while with one foot hanging over. And sure enough, NBC News is reporting today that Dave Chappelle's show at the Minneapolis First Avenue, which I've been there and I've even performed at, that's Prince-owned First Avenue. Everyone in Minneapolis knows First Avenue. It's a fantastic club, by the way. So he was going to perform at First Avenue, and now it's being canceled. And the venue says to our staff and artists and our community, "We hear you and we're sorry," the venue said in a statement on its website announcing that Wednesday's Dave Chappelle show had been canceled. And they're canceling it because, quote unquote, Chappelle's actions uphold a violent, heteronormative culture, meaning doesn't really heteronormative. I assume everyone knows what heteronormative means. It's kind of like the old school traditional gender roles of no homosexuality or whatnot, and directly violate First Avenue's code of conduct. Quote, "If staff and guests are held to this standard, performers should be too." Chappelle has faced widespread backlash over the past year over comments he made about transgender people in his Netflix special, The Closer, which this is going back months ago. And Netflix decided, we're not really upset about that. It's not really our job to please people on our platform. And First Avenue is obviously got some heat. And no doubt every venue that Chappelle plays at gets the exact same heat. And now those venues will get even more heat. All future venues will continue to get more heat because whoever was giving the heat is now going to double down, knowing that they got a notable venue to retract or cancel his performance.
So Tyler, if it's very interesting that they're comfortable doing this, but I wonder if they've had other genres come through that have
Sir Mix-a-Lot,
music that has harsh language that talks about F
Baby Got Back.
this and do that. You know what I mean? So where's
Are you referring to NWA, sir?
exactly? You name
Right.
it, all the above, right?
Right.
So where do they draw the line? Where do they draw
Far,
the line?
potentially, arguably, some might argue, far more egregious language has been said on stage against women, or pick your minority group.
I mean, what did Andrew Dice Clay? I mean, some of these comedians just, some of their pretty harsh language.
Mhm.
Be consistent.
You guys, it's really not. So Tyler is a Midwesterner, and he's been to First Ave, so he sort of intrinsically gets this. And look, I know the three lead management people and booking agents at First Avenue personally. I mean, we live in the arts community here in the Twin Cities, so it is a little bit unique, to this place. I think I don't know that the same thing is going to happen in Nashville when Chappelle tries to do his show there, right? Like, and so I do think it's like very specific to what are very progressive, and some would argue very liberal, but very progressive norms and social cultures in the arts community in the Twin Cities specifically, in Minneapolis specifically. And they just really leaned in. They got some pushback from some pretty heavy voices here in our community, and they just decided to pull the plug, and it was a really quick switcheroo to a different venue. So he did do the show here in Minneapolis, just not at First Ave.
Right.
That's unfortunate.
Why didn't they pause before even booking him? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. Well, okay, they certainly had sold tickets to the show, so it wasn't a matter of like, holy crap, nobody's coming, we should cancel the show, right? I mean,
right.
people were going to come see him. He actually booked in quite late for this show. It wasn't like it had been months. No, he tends to do that. Like, I'm just going to drop in to Minneapolis, which is not very typical for other performers, I suppose.
No. It's a great point, because he drops in unannounced, and I saw him perform unannounced in LA.
Yeah, like Prince used to here in Twin Cities. He used to just drop in to Fine Line or First Avenue and just pull up a show, right? But yeah, I'm sure it wasn't that they didn't talk about it or think about it, but I think it was like, let's roll. Like, we're gonna do this, and we'll see, right? And I don't know that they were expecting kind of the level, or at least the quality of those who were weighing in, saying this just, this isn't going to fly here.
Now, I've got a conspiracy theory here. If one, before Chappelle, Chappelle had the Chappelle show, which Americans will remember very fondly, most of us. It didn't, it was on Comedy Central, so it really didn't get deeply into Europe in the same way that it did in the U.S. But the Chappelle show is correctly regarded as one of the most important comedy series of all time. And he did one of, if not his most remarkable skit that he ever did in all the seasons of the Chappelle show, was the Rick James, "I'm Rick James, bitch" skit, which was with Charlie Murphy. What's the brother of the other comedian?
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy's brother, Charlie Murphy, is telling the story of meeting Prince. And in telling the story, it makes Prince look like a flowery bozo, essentially. And it's perhaps the biggest thing Dave Chappelle has ever done. It's the most viral skit Dave Chappelle has ever done, is a skit painting Prince as a flowery, overly artistic, pompous, arrogant kind of prick. So, is this in any way potentially some sort of revenge on Dave Chappelle?
That is an interesting theory, Tyler. I don't think so, and I'm actually, my husband and I are both big connoisseurs of Dave Chappelle's old skits, and I love that you went there, though. But
do you know the skit I'm talking about?
Yes, of course I know it. Yes, of course. Go ahead, Io.
If you've not seen it, if you don't know the skit I'm talking about, just simply Google the words "I'm Rick James, bitch" and get ready to laugh your ass off. That is one of the funniest things ever. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing, if you want to understand American culture, that's like required reading or viewing Dave Chappelle show.
Amen.
But in terms of
Absolutely.
comedy, jokes about bad things are not as bad as those bad things, and that's Jimmy Carr in his opening act on Netflix. And I think that's something important to keep in mind because we reflect on this and we reflect on the Oscars. Keep my what you know it's what kind of era are we living in? I feel like we're going back or regressing. I thought it was supposed to be about diversity because comedians are like a barometer on culture. They give us a reading of something that maybe is unpleasant or uncomfortable to talk about, but we all feel it in the air. Otherwise, we wouldn't laugh at it, right?
I'm
So
all good
just
with that.
This is South Park. This is South Park too. Same thing. Like that's
Right.
been a barometer for a decade of culture.
Amen.
Yeah.
Great point, Anna Marie. But the I have no problem with First Avenue in the if I have no problem with them if they had said to themselves, you know what, Dave Chappelle's not for us. That doesn't really fit with our code of conduct, our policy, our image, our whatever. Because First Avenue does have a unique image. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. It has its own thing, its own vibe, and yeah, I actually believe them when they say, you know what, Dave Chappelle doesn't really fit with our vibe. There's actually truth to that. I'm fine with that. What irks me is why once you've why didn't you think that through before you booked him? Why clear
Yeah,
the answer is
there's
obvious.
truth to that. There's truth to that. Like
There's total truth to that, and I
yeah.
got no problem with that. I got no problem with the venue being like, no, what, Dave Chappelle's not for us. Cool, right? Well, he's not right for the YMCA either. So,
Yeah, but
but my
why did they book it and not think? I mean, they had to have thought through it. I think that was just like they rolled the dice. I think they were like, we know this could be a problem, but maybe it won't be. You know,
well,
Yeah. I'm looking at their schedule, and their upcoming shows do not even fit a Chappelle. So it just doesn't even seem like it just seems illogical that they would have ever had him. Anyway.
I
yeah.
wonder I wonder if they did think through it. Actually, I thought this last night when I first saw the headline that maybe they actually knew that this was going to happen and they did it anyways, thinking and maybe this is my own kind of conspiracy theory and they thought we're going to support him anyways, knowing full well that we're going to have to move it to another venue. I don't know why I thought this, but anyways, we're going to have him here. We're going to pretend like it's going to actually go through in the event that they're going to protest and then ask whatever other venue to host it.
well, it wasn't about them. That's interesting though. It's in the vein of like there's no such thing as bad press, right? Like if you want First Avenue's name plastered over national media outlets for you know what I'm saying, like there's a theory there that you could roll with.
Absolutely, Anne Marie.
Okay. Interesting point to debate, especially in 2023. I wonder how Dave Chappelle feels about it because I could see him actually being secretly thrilled about this. So this
More material. They're giving
absolutely
him more material
this
and they're making him more historical. It's almost like,
correct.
do you remember that Florida band group that was banned in, they had a song called Banned in the USA. I can't
Two
think of the
Live Crew.
name. Two Live Crew. The best thing that happened to them is when people started destroying their DVDs and saying they're horrible, and they spun off of it. Eventually, nobody really knows them anymore, but they did really well when they got banned.
Okay, so I think we've got. Is there any other pressing non-tech news going on today? Maybe not. Okay, so
Well,
let's.
Tyler, there was. This Cal already started a room on. He's on the stage. Maybe
What's
he
that?
wants to address it.
Okay.
I think
And
it's the biggest
Tyler,
news.
I sent you two news article. If I don't know if you got covered those or not.
Are they non-tech? If just jump in and share them real fast. Cal, what's the
Okay,
It's non-tech. Yeah.
non-tech, yes. Both
oh,
of them were non-tech.
real fast? Go.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Ukrainian partners who were sharing cybersecurity threat information. The Cybercom told the Newsweek about how they are actively communicating with Ukraine. And then the Bloomberg quick take on Saudi Crown Prince, who is pouring billions of dollars in a sci-fi inspired megacity called Neom, but that was old. I don't know if you guys have covered that. And Amazon Cal just covered, so if you guys want to delve into that.
What's going on with Amazon, Cal? They just bought a medtech company.
One
No,
medical. It is
Very
no,
actually
small
the
one.
top headlines.
no. They bought
They
a
bought the
primary care physicians operation that has 8,000 corporate customers. It's a publicly traded company, so you can see
That's
the
tech news.
stocks.
That's the number 3 tech news item of the day.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
you
a
didn't see
tech
about
news.
tech news? Okay.
We'll get that. We'll get that one. It's number 3. So number 1 today. Hold on. Let's do the air horn.
Yeah.
Woo! God, Jesus. Sorry, eardrums. The the Verge and a whole bunch of people, New York Times, Guardian, Washington Post, USA Today, Axios, and CNBC, reporting that Facebook is now changing Facebook, the primary Facebook app, today works as a sort of homage to Twitter. Facebook used to be a little more like LinkedIn in before Twitter. Then Twitter came out. Facebook said, "Oh shit, that's the hotness. We should be more like that," and they did that. And then Facebook became this feed of stories, kind of like tweets. And everyone at the time was like, "Oh man, you just ripped off Twitter." And then Snapchat came out and was posting these little photos and videos that disappear after 24 hours at the top of the, and then they copied that. So they have both. They have both Snapchat and Twitter. And as we all know, TikTok is kicking Facebook's ass. And so it was only a matter of time. And here we are. Facebook is revamping its home feed to feel more like TikTok. What a surprise. I'm shocked. Is everyone shocked? We're all shocked. We're speechless. It's so unlike them to just copy another company. So Zuck's gonna Zuck. Zucker's gonna Zuck. And there it is. So Facebook can't beat them. Might as well join them. Might as well copy them. Let's clone them. And it was already starting to happen. They were kind of even trying to, if people have been trying to use Facebook lately, you've probably noticed, I have, that they kind of get you out of the Twitter influenced feed, and somehow you don't even know how. You end up in this sort of TikTok-like interface. And now they've realized that once they get you in that interface, you end up staying in their app a whole lot longer. So let's just get rid of that whole the OG Twitter inspired story feed. So there you go. Here it comes. TikTok 2.0. That's the story. Second story. Mojang Studios, makers of Minecraft, headquartered in Stockholm, born out from Stockholm, from a bunch of Swedes. Who I happen to know. It's a small town. Anyway, Mojang, makers of Minecraft, will not support or allow NFTs as they quote unquote create models of scarcity and exclusion that conflict with our guidelines and the spirit of Minecraft. There you go. Sweet and simple. Next up, Amazon, here as promised. Story number 3. Amazon will acquire primary healthcare provider One Medical for about $4 billion in an all.
Hey, Tyler, before you go there, because everyone's going to want to talk about, just as a quick news that just broke, Joe Biden just got tested positive for COVID. The president tested positive for COVID.
Well, good thing it doesn't hurt old people, right? So,
Yeah. Okay.
Amazon.
Great, Tina.
Say again?
As we covered yesterday, the B5 variant is evading all kind of immunity, vaccine-based or previous exposure doesn't matter, and it's getting worse with each replication. So we need to, really be very, very careful not to allow this transmission to happen because, Scientific communities and physicians knew from the beginning that's where it ends. If you allow the virus to replicate, it keeps on acquiring all these new variation and defense system against immunity.
Right. So back to the story. Amazon will acquire a primary healthcare provider called One Medical for $4 billion, all cash deal. Amazon's interest in healthcare and being a major player in healthcare is taking one big step forward today. The company's just announced it intends to buy One Medical. So that's not a surprise if you're a regular tech newser now, is it? No, not at all. We've been discussing this for nearly a year, that Amazon's going to do exactly this. They're going to go huge into medical. We've discussed this for several hours on end, and precisely how this should play out. And this fits very nicely with everything we discussed. So they're just getting warmed up, by the way. By the way, for those who don't know, Amazon's going to try and take over healthcare in America. They're going to try and replace everything as healthcare for the most part, just in the similar way that they're going to probably try and do with supermarkets to some degree. But they might even have a better chance in healthcare than they have had in supermarkets. But because the healthcare industry is just so foobarred, that they can come in and optimize, and they're going to, better yet, they're going to do to healthcare what they did to e-commerce. Let's put it that way. Amazon came in and just took over e-commerce and have a very significant share of e-commerce. Does anyone know off the top of their head the percentage of e-commerce that is Amazon? It's quite a significant percentage.
I think it's about 30% or something like that.
Somebody can dig it up, but I imagine they have aspirations of doing this. 55. Wow. I imagine they have aspirations of doing the same in medical by lowering costs, just like they did in e-commerce. Just undercut, remove all the fat, or cut out the middlemen. Efficiency, wild efficiency. And they've got, by the way, 1 million employees to beta test this shit on. Those 1 million employees have families, many of them. That's several millions of people to test stuff on at their families. And then they've got hundreds of million. How many million Prime members now? 25? They have.
I think 85% of the U.S. households have Prime.
Get out of here. No way. 85%.
I think so. Yeah,
No.
you can try it.
No.
I'm telling you.
Can't be that high.
I'm telling you. You can Google it.
Okay. So, but once they roll this out to their Prime members, well, watch out. Watch out. Because they're going to there's no question, they will be able to offer you health insurance at a ridiculously better bang for buck than anyone else in the marketplace at scale.
So it's
I'm really
Glad you
excited for
mentioned
this
that.
news because I think with the advent of all these wearables, customer or patients or potential patients would be better off getting diagnosed earlier, perhaps also developing better health related decisions to prevent chronic illnesses instead of just waiting till the end and then getting treatment for diseases, and the complication keeps on pouring in. So I think Amazon is going to or have a potential to change the way we manage healthcare or look at healthcare, more geared towards prevention instead of just writing prescription and tolerating these chronic long-term illnesses, which are a huge weight on the healthcare dollars. And in the end, the outcomes are still not improving based on the CDC data of raising all the graphs of obesity and cardiovascular health diseases and so on and so forth.
so on Prime
The
users.
concern I would have is, one centralized data, especially healthcare data, being somewhere, and that a lot of the insurance companies having access to it, because the U.S. It is private insurance-based kind of healthcare, And because of the Obamacare nowadays, they cannot even deny someone by pre-existing condition, but they still play many horrible things not to pay anything. I had a back problem, for example, and we have one of the best coverage, and I had to wait 2 weeks to get my MRI because they just were delaying and delaying to approve it. So my worry is if they get access to it, they will find a way not to give us a coverage to have insurance. So that to me is the biggest problem. If they have this data that even they knew it, that I have issues with, diabetics or whatever, without me knowing it, by the time I find out, something, my coverage is not going to have that because of the private sector-based insurance coverage in the U.S. That's my biggest concern.
That
Cami, you have
highlights
a
a very
oh
important need
yeah,
for protections legislatively. So,
Yeah,
Cami, you have a comment?
your doctor is gonna if Amazon is your primary care, and you have an Amazon Alexa device in your house, your doctor is now listening to everything in your house.
And
Yes,
That
Cheryl, I do.
I think, Tyler, that
Thank you.
Yeah.
the insurance companies are very, malicious right now, shifting all of this information and Amazon taking care of your health and being the insurance provider may alleviate this problem, perhaps messy. I see it as a positive change instead of being negative. The HIPAA is not covering anything, the healthcare data associated with your apps anyway. And previously, insurance was using pre-existing condition as an excuse for not to pay. But here, if Amazon is providing healthcare and providing health insurance, I think that loophole would abolish and provide better healthcare.
I
don't you
think I
think
heard
that's
Cami
even
trying
worse?
to speak.
Yeah. Cami, go
That's
ahead.
even make it worse because now using even the wearables and other things, they have access to my healthcare information, and that now they are the same people who are giving me my healthcare insurance. They can actually find a way not to cover me or decline me or even to just in the first place have insurance coverage, not even before I get sick, because now they have the inside track. I think that might be even worse to me.
I think
Cami?
Cami was trying to speak,
Cami, go
and then
ahead, Cami.
Messi, I'd
Uh,
like to answer that.
thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Cheryl. What an interesting topic, folks. Here's the bigger picture. This is an incredible, great timing for Amazon, especially when you look at some of the statistics. For example, millennials are more likely to be Amazon Prime shoppers, and half of the millennials have Amazon Prime, according to YPulse. And also, if you look at the numbers from the CDC, those who adopted and utilized telehealth tend to be millennials, and that's pretty interesting. And so, if you take a look at their figures, millennials are far more likely to utilize telehealth, and telehealth really got a boost to the pandemic. For example, in March 2020, there's 154% increase in telehealth visits compared to in the last week of March compared to the year prior in 2019. Now, granted, some of this adoptions has waned, as we start to as the number of COVID cases start to decrease in certain areas for certain strains. However, all right, telehealth is here to stay, and Amazon. This is the third largest deal for Amazon in terms of acquisition, and it's all cash, so they really mean business. Although it's not that hugely expensive, it's only 3.9 billion. Well, that may sound like a lot. It's not a lot when you look at Amazon's war chest. And they're a very strategic company. So what they're doing is they're constructing the building blocks in order to disrupt healthcare and at the same time increase their reach through their Amazon Web Services, also known as AWS. And what's interesting, furthermore, is the acquisition of this company. I mean, this was an Alphabet company, in terms of formerly known as Google Ventures, was invested in this company. And as you know, Google is a competitor in the web hosting space, although many would argue that AWS is far and away the dominant market leader at this time. But you're going to have some elements of cooperation, or perhaps what you're going to see more likely over time is that Amazon is going to force their acquired company to migrate from Google's backbone, which I'm presuming they're using, given that they were backed by Google Ventures, now Alphabet, and start to really put a foothold into telehealth using the backbone of AWS. So these are things to watch. Look, the rise of the millennials, the preponderance of millennials who are already Amazon Prime shoppers, the millennials who are already ready for telehealth, who are reasonably healthy, at least healthier than the older population, and also more willing to try out novel ways of receiving healthcare.
Yeah, if I could add to
If I
that,
can, if
go
I
ahead.
can add like a different perspective, I don't think health should be a for-profit business, but maybe that's a very European point of view. If you have anything that is not profitable, like a rare disease, there's no way a company that is profit driven will give any resources to a very to relatively rare diseases. It will take care of maybe diabetes and all kinds of stuff that makes profit, and also the illusion that this will drive us into more preventive care. How would they make money with that? That makes no sense. Like, you don't
Yeah.
make money with preventive care. And if you're a for-profit company, you don't care about preventive care. And you don't need a company like Amazon to do it. If you live in Portugal for a while and you pay taxes there, you're part of the governmental health plan, you get letters every year, come to get a checkup, come to get vaccines, blood drawn, and you have one family doctor for your whole family, so that that doctor knows your family and the risk factors firsthand. You can keep that doctor as long as that doctor is alive and willing to work. So you don't need
Katerina,
Amazon for
that's what I
preventive
have
care.
with One Medical. That's exactly what I have with One Medical and have had for the past 10 years.
John, you wanted to
To
speak?
respond to
Hold
how
on,
preventive
Aram.
care.
Aram, John wants to speak.
Oh no, I think there's a good thread going that I don't want to distract from. So keep that thread going, and then I'm happy to come back in later.
Is it okay to
Fran,
speak, Cheryl, now?
Heather.
Okay, thank you. So, what Katerina mentioned in terms of preventive uh, practice of healthcare not being profitable, agreed 100%. That's why the healthcare dollars have not been geared towards preventive healthcare, because the pharma company, all the other big, huge, profit-driven, businesses are involved. For the first time ever, I see a positive change. Amazon providing healthcare and focusing on preventive procedures, preventing illnesses, can be profitable for them. Why? Because they are gaining data. They are getting a lot of information, which can provide them some profit, which other companies, healthcare industries were not getting. And the point about telehealth have been used by elderlies, by pediatric population, by everyone in remote areas, especially because there are lack of healthcare facilities. So that does not play any role here. Why? Because the main business model which may make money to Amazon is how they are collecting all this information with the help of wearables, just identifying the factors that are causing illnesses, and preventing those illnesses will help reducing the cost paid by their insurance company. So they have incentives to bring the cost down, to promote positive healthcare related measures, and also with the wearable related data and the business they can provide to all this med tech industry, they can still make money. I'm very positive that it will take health industry in a positive direction.
Yeah,
To
that's a
me,
great point.
is the pro.
So which
Okay.
data broker will then sell your data
It's
if
not
it's
only
out
about
there?
the, it's
You
Katerina,
really want all your data, your health data, your family
Katerina,
history data? If you give all that data away, you don't just give away privacy and sovereignty to yourself. You will give it away for your next generations. I hope you know
Katerina,
that, and you don't even give a chance to your next generation, to your kids and nieces and everyone else, a chance to have sovereignty over their health
Privacy
data.
illusion.
Health
Katerina,
insurance
I
companies.
was involved in the first health maintenance organizations in the 1980s, and they had the idea that prevention was the way to lower healthcare costs for everyone. And the reason it failed was because people did not want to practice prevention. They wanted, it wasn't the doctors, it was the patients. They believed that the healthcare system could fix them no matter what. And they weren't willing to adjust diet, exercise, or anything. And they were the people in our healthcare system in the United States, they have no personal responsibility for their health. And although now they are, because the health insurance has gotten so expensive, but the HMO that I was with went out of business because they kept offering exercise classes, nutrition classes, preventive screenings, and nobody took them because they thought, well, fuck it. If I have a heart attack, I'll go to the emergency room and they'll do an operation and give me some pills and I'll be fine, and I won't pay for it because my health insurance will pay for it.
Yeah, and
But
Okay,
there's
that's
two
Katerina,
things
perfectly
that
into
So,
what I
say you
what I
have a
wanted to say.
genetic disorder in your family. Let's say your grandmother has some sort of heart failure genetic disorder or a high likelihood of diabetes or ALS, whatever it is. And the Amazon knows this. Amazon is one of the biggest employers in the US. And they know you will be worthwhile to put money and effort into until your 40s, because then most likely you get ALS or Alzheimer's or your heart will fail. So that's the amount of effort you put in. They are maybe also putting buying education companies, taking over education in the US. So they know this person will be efficient for the work world until they are 40. So let's make less effort on this person education, because if you put 20 years of education, make them a medical doctor, they will only work maybe 20 years. So that's stupid, right? So let's give them maybe a job to fix cars or whatever. I don't know, like to dig holes for dead people, whatever it is, because that's the amount of data they will have and that's the amount of control they will have. So you will in the future not be selected maybe by the efforts you put in, but also by the amount of data they have, how long you will be healthy enough to perform a specific job. And then they have also genetic data about how good your memory can be to the max. Maybe some epigenetic changes due to trauma. Maybe you, I don't know, some war survivor now from the Ukraine. They all screwed up, right? All the kids that were born, pregnancies during this war, they all fucked up epigenetically. So why put them into a good university and put effort into them? Because they most likely will earlier onset of Alzheimer's, earlier onset of all kinds of inflammatory disease, obesity, and so on due to epigenetic changes. So let's not give them a great education. Let's give them like a kind of okay standard of living, but that's it, right? So that's the amount of control and data people will have in the future for future generations that you're just giving away. Because a government, you could just go and vote and have a government taking care of this and have sovereignty over your future
You
generation.
know what? We can't. We've tried to do it many times. In the United States, we have a different theory. I don't agree with it. I want universal health care. I want single payer health care. But the basic, population of the United States believes in the free market, and it's the way the country was founded. And stand or fall, we'll never get that kind of health care.
Can I offer a different kind of
Yes.
framework for how to think about this? So, to Dr. Francine's point, the emergence of HMOs in the 80s were a stunning failure. And I have a sort of different obituary for them. And that is that in general, motivating behavioral change is extremely difficult and a long term prospect. And indeed, as Dr. Francine said, patients just want to go in and get a pill, get a fix. They don't want to invest. But there is a business model that works there. And the business model that works there is that you have a much longer time horizon for when you realize the benefit of investing in behavioral change. And so the problem in the American fee-for-service world um, and employer-based healthcare is that every time somebody changes a job, they often change their insurance, and every time anyone moves, they change their healthcare coverage, and as a consequence of that, and healthcare delivery organization investing in behavioral change and in healthier lifestyle kinds of interventions, which do work and can very much improve in health, they invest, and some other health plan or insurer gets the benefit of that investment because switching health plans, health insurers is a very, very common phenomenon. So I don't think because of the genetic uh, um, political structure of this country, we're going to see single payer anytime soon, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's initiatives notwithstanding. I just don't think it's going to happen. What I think and what I've been believing for a long time is that healthcare in this country will not be transformed into one of the big tech companies is willing to invest $20 billion, spend a lot of time and careful analysis to be in it for the long haul. And at that point in time, it's likely to cause a level of consolidation in the industry where there will only be a few big players, which might well conform to the American political genetic code of having choice, but not choice that is so local and so difficult to maintain that investment in long-term health is justified so that those payers who invest in the long-term health through behavioral change actually reap the benefits of that from an economic model. And so I think there is an outcome that that the announcement today of Amazon acquiring One Medical may actually catalyze, and that is a significant consolidation of long-term players in the market, so that rather than a single payer system, a few payer system, so that you get the benefits of innovation through competition and avoid the stagnation that you tend to see in single payer systems, and at the same time provide some level of choice. But if we can preserve the opportunity to invest for the long haul and that the benefits accrue to the entities investing, I think there's an opportunity. And really, the other major factor is the distinction between fee-for-service and value-based care, because fee-for-service very much, you get what you incentivize, and what fee-for-service incentivizes is doing more stuff medically rather than behaviorally, because the behavioral side is not as lucrative as the medical side structurally in this country, and there's a whole lot of regulatory inertia behind that. So as we see a shift from fee for service to value-based care, where improving the health of a population is in the financial interest of the care delivery system, then I think we could see an oligopoly of consolidated health insurance that has good reason economically to invest in the long-term health of individuals. And my hope is, and I have no insight into this at all, but my hope is that Amazon will be willing to invest in individuals and populations for the long haul and help catalyze the emergence of an oligopoly of insurers that provide long-term care that have economic incentives for investing in behavioral change. And the last thing I'll say is Dean Ordish's book, Undo It, clearly demonstrates that with really thoughtful evidence-based practice of behavioral change, it doesn't have to be a decade before you realize benefits. His book called Undo It uh, uh, catalogs a lot of the scientific research, much of it by him, showing that you can shorten that timeline between an intervention, a behavioral intervention, and improvement in health. And so there's a convergence of value-based healthcare, consolidation in the industry, and evidence basis that you can achieve better health for an individual and population over time. That hopefully Amazon will blaze that trail because it's long overdue. They have the deep resources and the deep pockets to do it, and they have
Okay,
their
calm down.
PBM, their pharmacy benefits management arm. They have their telemedicine arm. So they're putting the pieces of the puzzle together in a very methodical way. And whether they are through their distribution channel with Amazon Prime going to be the one to capture the market, or whether they're the one that stimulates the consolidation and the focus on health and the patient experience. And as we talked about in Cal Patel's room earlier, the care delivery experience. So the burnout factor in healthcare right now is so high. Amazon's going to have to pay a lot of attention to not only creating a good experience for the patient, but creating a good experience for the caregivers to make this sustainable.
Hey, so
Just to add on a little one point, Ken, I apologize. Everything that John said, the value-based care, combining that what Katerina's concern is, evidence-based clinical research have proven that identifying patients with psychological, emotional, and some certain epigenetic, framework or epigenetic related illnesses, if caught on earlier with the behavior modification, which Amazon have plenty of opportunity and technology to do so, using unconventional systems to change those behaviors, have resulted in improvement of healthcare and prevention of such epigenetic or behavioral related illnesses. So it's a positive thing. I think it's not negative. It's going to open more ways of addressing these issues in a creative, technologically advanced way instead of keeping it restricted because it was in favor of certain companies previously because of their profit model.
yeah, I was just going to answer what Tyler asked about how many Prime members are there. So Jeff Bezos, in his very last letter as CEO, said worldwide there's roughly 200 million Prime members. They've never disclosed the U.S. number. The U.S. number, and this may be inaccurate, people have estimated of the 200 million, there's 147 million in the U.S. If that number is accurate, that'd be about, I don't know, 60% of the country or something. So so it may not be 80%, but it's significant. The one thing that didn't come up in this room, didn't come up in Cal's room, I just posited for people to think about. That's why actually, when we were starting off, I mean, is Amazon even a tech company anymore, or should we just call them the conglomerate? Because they keep going in, big into other industries. And what are they not going to own? They own 33% of the cloud business. They're buying, movie studios to go, because Amazon Prime already has its own streaming service. So then they bought MGM, and and as I said before, I don't think that was an antitrust issue because MGM is so small. But it would be interesting to see what happens now, by the way, with Netflix works on AWS, by the way. It's actually a risk disclosure in their financials, but how dependent they are on AWS. So it's interesting now with their deal with Microsoft. Is Netflix getting concerned about Amazon becoming a competitor on video services on video streaming, that maybe as part of a deal that hasn't actually been announced with Microsoft, because we don't know what the exact deal is, that maybe they're going to migrate over to Microsoft for the cloud, and Microsoft's made an agreement maybe not to compete with them on video streaming for like content. But they got into groceries. They're manufacturing their own TV sets. They used to be a reseller of other people's televisions. Now they're making their own televisions, and you got Amy Klobuchar's big tech bill out there. And I think somebody should really start thinking about how much of business and how many businesses and how many industries are they going to allow Amazon to get into before you just have this like one giant company dominating everything. I think that is actually a bigger concern than just the implications, on medical care. And I'm done speaking.
Eric.
If I
I
may,
wanted to add, if I may.
Eric. Eric has been waiting. Hold on.
yeah, sorry, I'll just try to be very quick. So for myself, I had cancer surgery during the pandemic, and only thanks to these extensive data sets did I qualify because they calculated some expected years of living. So that aspect of, I guess, being evaluated is inescapable. It already exists within the system, but the immediate cost savings that I see here, forget the insurance down the line because we have more users. It's about reducing the cost of a surgery. So for me, if my cancer had been caught within a month, and this was my second time having the cancer surgery during the pandemic, just to clarify, but if the surgery, or if I had the surgery within the first month, it would have been on the order of $1,000 to $2,000, just a laser and cut it out. But fast forward 10 months, and you see something like, hey, now it's on the order of $1 million. There's an entire room full of doctors. There's 2 weeks of stay at the hospital. Now, even after my cancer surgery, I was like super vigilant, but there's like vigilance fatigue. Eventually you get tired. So, can we get the data to work for us? I'm willing to trade privacy for anxiety because that's the trade off, effectively speaking, if you are a high risk person. You don't necessarily want to be thinking about it all the time. You want it to be passively collected. So, just a few thoughts there. Thanks.
I don't know if I can jump in.
Yep.
Yes.
So one of the things I wanted to mention, yeah, I agree. I've always mentioned this in my personal field. Given my experience in process redesign in healthcare, I do believe it'll take an organization like Amazon. I actually thought Apple would be the front runner on this, but it'll take something like Amazon to shake things up in healthcare and shift us more towards that preventative care that'll drive cost. I agree with that. And I also agree that this would create an ecosystem, but my concern is also that ecosystem. And where I see a long term issue is if Amazon owns the process completely and begin to produce products that are in line with healthcare, then they can essentially drive costs for those products that they're producing and drive down competition. And medical equipments are already a very difficult industry to enter into. This could potentially become a behemoth for small companies, and that is never good for the end user. Where I'm thinking is more importantly in the elder demographic, where the income is more constricted than their earlier years. They depend on that competitive effort and edge to drive the cost down and create entryway for them and their needs. We'll be siloing that entire segment and creating a disparity as well as a challenge for them. I think long term, this is short sighted. But overall, I think especially if we're seeing Amazon collaborate with other organizations to keep them equitable, to keep them transparent, I see this as an add value for the healthcare system overall. Thank you.
And that is why you have to really make sure that Medicare and Medicaid continue to exist, because the marginalized segment that you're talking about, is covered by, including the elderly, including me, is covered by Medicare. And Medicare, if you have worked your whole life and contributed to it, at age 65, you get probably in some ways the best health care of your life. In other words, you get pretty much anything you need.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
Dr. Francine, that's for the politically potent elderly, as you know, because you live in Arizona. In Arizona, because Medicaid is a federal state system, Arizona decided, hey, you know what? We're not going to cover liver transplants anymore for Medicaid patients. So it's going to be really dependent on what state you live in. If you live in a state like yours, or a state like Mississippi, or you're going to get, and you're poor, you're going to get far less. Far less healthcare or access to healthcare than if you live in California. So,
Don't
And
make
it's
those
dependent on the
judgments,
package,
Ken.
whether it's Part A or Part B. It does depend
Arizona
on the package.
expanded Medicaid, Ken. Arizona expanded Medicaid and covers, and in fact made its own program, which is kind of a capitated program called Access. And the people who are on Access, who are the marginalized, get, the rules for getting on it are very strict, but, you do get good care from doctors who take it. It's very much, Medicaid is very much, our Medicaid access is very much like the NHS in the UK. And I know this because my daughter lives in London, and my other daughter is on access. So I have had a chance, and I'm, radically interested in changing the healthcare system. So, I,
I
I,
just remember when Governor Brewer decided in her budget to, cut off liver transplants, period, on that program. That was some years ago, I guess, but,
yeah, well, she's gone.
And my idea is imagine this Medicaid, Medicare kind of services provided to you, same amount of care, but in your younger years, focused on prevention. Instead of somebody at later age developing cardiovascular illnesses, getting an MI, which is a preventable illness, earlier on you are treated and trained and provided with different methods to not go to that point, and then being able to enjoy your later years in life without living with that kind of disability or Alzheimer or diabetes, and enjoying those years of your life, prolonging your life with health and vitality. That's the idea, which is possible to do so if we focus on the early on preventive health care, which Amazon can do.
Tyler.
Well, I don't see any of the blue villages, of the blue spots that they where people are over 100 years old, that they needed Amazon for that. They needed just a healthy, regular, not so stressful life, like good foods, local foods, and walk. Not too much exercise, not too little exercise, not too much protein, more vegetables. That's the life they needed, right? To get to this healthy life. They didn't need Amazon, and they don't need
I
um
agree with you,
tech world.
Katrina, but then those
They
people have
probably where
been
Tyler
living,
lives, people have a healthier life. They have
yeah, but
nothing
they've been
to do
living
with the
like
tech
that,
world.
right? People
And
who are already living in urban areas have a
yes,
certain
and
mindset
you
and
think
lifestyle.
more
I
tech
think
and
both
a
of you
bigger
are speaking at the
company
same
that
time.
wants you to use all the tech will help you to be healthier. That's the paradox illusion that is sold here. And again, you give away sovereignty of your future generations to an organization that has no ethical guidelines, because your family doctor is held by ethical guidelines. They have this thing they swear on, and they are trained to have ethical guidelines. Amazon has no such thing. The only thing is profits, and to gain more power and to get into more different areas of life we need, and to make profit on our lives and on our data. So you should feel comfortable sharing all your data with your family doctor, but for sure not with a company like Amazon. Then rather go on an island, Sardine, or wherever, eat healthy, and don't give away your data, because you will give away sovereignty of your future generations. Amazon will recommend you what books to read and your kids and your grandkids based on all the health data they have from you and from people of your family.
I
Like,
think you're
how
right. I think
does
it's
social
worth the risk.
media work? How does social media work right now? What
Okay.
type of advertising, what type of movies, what type of
Okay, moving
YouTube
on.
gets suggested?
Okay,
It's stuff that
moving
you
on.
like. It's not stuff.
Holy shit, Katerina, take a clue. The next one is that Tesla says a Bitcoin impairment negatively impacted its Q2 profitability and that it sold 75% of its Bitcoin worth approximately $936 million in the quarter. So everyone will probably remember when Michael Saylor convinced this Elon Musky guy to put a whole bunch of the Tesla's cash into Bitcoin. And I'm curious if anyone can recall off the top of their head the price that Tesla acquired Bitcoin, all of that Bitcoin at. And it's around $1 billion or whatever. Anyway, so they just sold 75% of it for about 936 million, which makes sense. Um, anyway, Michael Saylor tweeted about this headline saying, if you sell 75% of your Bitcoin, you will only have 25% of your Bitcoin left. Yeah. Some good
And I
math.
think they declared $100 and something million loss from that crypto sale.
Ah,
They sold it for profit. We covered the earning call yesterday and had a great discussion with the Tesla celebrities on Clubhouse. That it was not in loss. They made profit. The point they entered the Bitcoin market was way early, and now they not only covered their losses from this quarter, but are there to bounce above and beyond this market, which is not in very good shape right now. So Tesla did a very smart move.
I think they make a loss out of the Bitcoin. They bought probably
Actually,
about
they did declare a
32,000
$100
and
million
then sold it at
loss.
28,000.
Yeah, I was
So they
just
make
going
a
to say the
loss.
math
But
isn't
The
mathing. They
average
yeah,
lost.
price.
the
Yeah.
reason why they sell it is because they want to make their balance sheet profitable.
The average price when they bought us 31,600 to 20. Now they are selling at around 28,000. So there's the loss.
a minor loss. Okay. 10% or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, around 10%. Yeah.
But they
So
still make their balance sheet look good out of that. So that's the
Yes,
And
good
they
thing
the
did
about it.
comment
final
that they
outcome
sold
was
none of their
positive.
No,
Dogecoin.
the Bitcoin they lost money.
The
Thank goodness for
final.
Dogecoin.
It's hanging in there.
So the next is from The Guardian that TikTok is the fastest growing news source among UK adults, being used by 7%, up from 1% 2 years ago. 32% use Facebook, 17% use Twitter, 16% use Instagram for news. So TikTok is catching up quickly to Instagram and Twitter in terms of using the app for news.
Well, I wonder on that note if TikTok has any videos of the tanks that seem to be so casually parked in front of Chinese banks as of 5 or 6 hours ago. So
That's a great question, actually. And there's to that. That's a brilliant point, by the way, Eric. There's a somewhat related article that Saudamini found because she covers India quite well, being from India. And the headline out of India today is that TikTok has taken down nearly 12.5 million videos in Pakistan for violating community guidelines. Now, Pakistan happens to be the CCP's biggest investment in the Belt and Road Initiative. So, Pakistan and China are very much intertwined in the political level and economically and whatnot. And I have to imagine that has some bearing on the fact that Pakistan may have asked TikTok to remove a bunch of videos, and or China, on its own accord, decided to remove a bunch of content in Pakistan that might have been anti-Chinese, because there are Chinese Belt and Road Initiative engineers being murdered on the streets of Karachi and Lahore. So I can imagine China wants to control what's being seen in Pakistan, but I can imagine the Pakistan intelligence agencies who run Pakistan also want to control what's going on there. Who's on whose call these 12.5 million videos are being pulled? I don't know. But that's a really interesting point, which is, back to Eric's point, to what degree are the tanks around the banks in China being reported on TikTok? That's a great question.
May I provide some information here? The tanks on I've found an article in Backchannel as well. But first of all, the tank are not in Henan. The Henan Bank's crisis, those tanks were in Shandong, were shot in Shandong because the hotel there was a building there. It was
We must
verified as
keep going. We don't need to know the color of the buildings, but
okay. So I mean, the video was shot in Shandong. That is a province next
right.
to Henan, so it's very far away. And secondly, the people in that video were very calm. And secondly, they didn't wear a mask at all. So this was, I believe, it's a propaganda from anti-communist people. But still, yes, it provided at least timing to increase the tense between the general people and the central government. But I would say that there is not right now. There is no tanks video in Henan Banks. There, because on Twitter the first batch of this video were all captioned with "These are the banks sending to Henan banks," but no. So a little, because of this is misinformation. So please be careful with
Okay.
what you are reading.
All right.
Yeah, but the absence of it completely, because at least on Twitter, as you mentioned, you can see that there's a reference to it. But if you go to their
Yes.
system, is it not mentioned at all? And to what extent does that undermine critical thinking or policy making for the populace?
I would say the propaganda is from both sides, from these CCP patriot and the CCP anti protest. So I mean, sometimes when we see that, we like to believe it's true, but yeah, still, I would just yes, it's not true this time. Okay.
Yeah. There's like 80,000 anti-communist protests a year, I think, in China. So just to give people some context of how much potentially you're not seeing at all on TikTok. So
So
this
check
is
this out.
merely but one.
Next story is related from the Financial Times. Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Twitter and others register for a license to continue doing business in Indonesia, as Indonesia demanded they do by Wednesday. That was yesterday, and they've done it. And under this new regulation, they might have to censor content, gee, you think, and hand over users' data. Oh, fun, good times. So, here comes Indonesia, following in the footsteps, as we said other countries would. And I don't know if I said, but I remember when we were guessing who would be next after, who would be following in the footsteps of India, that other large countries would do it soon. I'm willing to bet. And if somebody has a phonographic memory, when we discussed in the earlier days of when India was cracking down on big tech and forcing them to take down unfriendly content, for lack of a better word, and user data, uh, I remember making the point that other countries are going to sit up and take notice of this behavior and be influenced by it and likely replicate it, and that the big countries would be the ones that would be able to do it first. Remember this point that like tiny countries, are not going to be able to flex on these big tech companies in this way, but other big countries would. And I believe I might have even said Indonesia would be one of the ones to do it first because they're one of the biggest countries. And social media is very widely consumed in Indonesia. So I wonder if I did say that. I suspect that I did, but I can't say that I did. I don't have a perfect memory of that point, but it sounds like
I don't remember about Indonesia, but I do remember the discussion and how big countries, CCP or India, are going to influence other nations around them with economics and social media related control.
And given the size of Indonesia, I think, relatively speaking, it's also a large player.
so. Anyway, it's unfortunate for the Indonesians that the government is now going to be using the social media data. Uh, the next is, and the freedom of speech will be curtailed to some degree, marginalized. The next is that Amazon spent a record $5 million lobbying in Q2. So averaged out, that's $20 million a year they're spending on lobbying. Okay, next is Qualcomm unveils the Snapdragon W5 Gen 1 for wearables based on a 4 nanometer process and debuting in watches. So you're going to have smarter Android watches coming soon. And from Bloomberg, I swear to God, we don't pick these. Cheryl, you see the next one? The next one's from Bloomberg about some guy named Jason Calacanis. I'll help you out here. It's pronounced Jason Calacanis. He happens to be, uh, the closest person to me other than my own personal family. And, we're essentially an extended family. And Jason Calacanis. And by the way, if you click my Clubhouse profile, you'll see Jason is the person who invited me into Clubhouse. So Jason Calacanis says litigation and possibly criminal charges await the companies and grifting VCs who knowingly flipped crypto tokens to retail investors. It says, watch out, venture capital. The regulators are coming. That's a warning from longtime angel investor Jason Calacanis. And then there's a bunch of tweets about it, like Nouriel Rubini, who's kind of the guy who consistently, cries that the sky's falling. Well, by the way, my Twitter account handle and my email is Steep Decline, so we're in good company. I'm not criticizing him. It's just how he kind of brands himself. He tweets that Jason Calacanis rips into grifting VCs, flipping crypto tokens to retail criminal action may follow into this duping of retail suckers. Yeah, I can see that. I can see regulators wanting to make a point. A whole lot of people were hurt very badly. And some of them might be very influential and might have very influential friends and might be able to get them to step into this ring. Indeed, some banks might have gotten their feathers ruffled, heaven forbid. Anyway, interesting to see Jason's name in the news in that way. By the way, he was the co-host of the very first few episodes of Tech News Around the World. And
So Tyler, I've
yeah,
listened to Jason speak on a couple of subjects where he seems to have a very, which I guess because he is one, he wants to, protect himself. He has a very expansive view of where liability lies. Sometimes probably too broad. Unless you're a VC that's actively involved in managing a company and you just put money in and you're not on the board, I don't really think you're going to have the liability. But I know because I just listened to him the other day where I think he got off a certain board and wasn't, I don't know if it was related to crypto. He got off a board simply because he got concerned about, maybe the liability exposure or something. And that's
right.
different if you're on the board, but even as a board member, you're generally protected. It's only when you're kind of actively involved with the management, decisions. You just put money in. I mean, it's no different than putting money in, IBM or Pepsi Cola. You're not responsible for what they do. You're just a stockholder.
Yeah. Well, Jason happens to know some rather influential VCs who got quite into crypto. And he might be making this statement based on conversations he's had.
Right, that may be one of his co-hosts, by the way, on the All In podcast, who has deeper involvement in some of his companies.
Yeah,
Well,
and he disagrees with his co-hosts a lot. And is it Freeberg or Sachs that's deep in the crypto? But those two, it's a good
well,
discussion because they're
well,
on.
Sachs was, but also I think
Yeah,
Shamoff was into Solana apparently. Yeah.
or was he?
Chamath's
Yeah,
one of the biggest whales of Bitcoin, by the way. And both were in Solana. That's one of many, many coins. But there's David Sachs and Chamath are obviously knowledgeable in the space, and they may know things that they don't want to have be said from their mouths. And Jason might be privy to some information that he thinks people should know about. So anyway, I'm just pontificating. I'm spitballing here, but a bit of conjecture, if you will. I'll tell you this: Jason is. Here's something that I know that is related to this article that no one else knows. Part of what would motivate Jason in this regard, Jason is many things, but one more than anything, he is a fighter for underdogs and people who get taken advantage of. That is so deep in his being. It is so incredibly fundamental to who he is to defend the underdog who got wronged. And this is a similar thing. He's basically saying like a whole bunch of people got screwed, and the people who took advantage of some underdogs, and they might, this is. I'll give you a concrete example. For example, the origin story of the very, very large conference, one of America's largest startup events, that Jason and Mike Arrington started, along with myself and Heather Hardy. I kind of was Jason's right-hand guy, and Heather Hardy was Mike Arrington's right-hand gal over at TechCrunch. And together we did the TechCrunch 50 events, which became the launch conference, and TechCrunch Disrupt. And that whole thing started when Jason and I went to dinner in Santa Monica at our favorite little sushi spot there, Sushi King. And another friend of ours, Jason Nazar, popped in and said, "Did you know there's an angel network called Keiretsu that's paying people to pitch at their events? And there's a conference, I forget the name of the conference, that was charging startups to pitch at the conference." And Jason's like, "What? That's wrong. The world needs to know that's wrong. That's absolutely, somebody needs to do something about this." And he starts tweeting about it. Like, if you're at a conference charging startups to pitch, you're going to get, dealt with, and da 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 da. And that was I believe the founding premise that lit a fire in Jason to bring together all the top investors in Silicon Valley into one room. It was at the San Francisco Palace Hotel the first year. And filled the room with all the top investors who, and then cherry picked 50 startups to pitch on stage and not pay a penny, not 1 cent, to pitch in front of all the top investors in Silicon Valley at once. All of them. 500 of them. The top 500 tech investors were all in one room together, and these 50 startups didn't pay a penny to pitch to them. And that was and the tech press were invited, and the whole point was, hey, press, please let everyone know these startups didn't pay a penny, and and by the way, all these investors here are here to tell you that they don't want to be part of anything where people are paying to pitch to them. They don't like that. Startups should never have to pay to get in front of these people, these investors. They really abhor that, and they do. And that was kudos to Jason for doing that and help changing the culture. And I just tell that story because it rarely gets told, and even people who've attended, hundreds of thousands of people have attended those conferences over the year and don't know that what really motivated that, and that it relates to this headline, which is again, this is just Jason at his core. If you end up spending thousands and thousands and thousands of lunches and dinners and breakfasts with him, as I have, you'll know this is just so core to where his head is at all the time, is like looking out for the little guy. God bless him for that. And no one really recognizes him for that, but I do, because it's you can't separate that from who he is as a person, and yet it's not part of his reputation, but it totally should be. It totally should be. Anyway,
I just want to say that over the years, I actually never realized that, like, I read this article a few years before. And in the times that you've told this story a few times, I was like, wait, Lisa needs braces, dental plan. I'm like, this is the guy who started that movement, because I always thought it was wax that, hey, you want to go find investors? Well, give us money. I'm like, wait, but I thought I told you the problem was I don't have money. So a lot of great ideas can have an amazing start. Even something so simple as a business model innovation shouldn't require cash up front. It's the power of ideas. So just want to say that it blew my mind when I realized that, tech news around the world somehow had this connection to this obscure article that I read years ago that was like, hey, these guys just started their own conference. They started inviting people and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Only in America. So pretty awesome, Tyler.
By the way, if people are interested in hearing about how Shabbat and Sachs move around Solana, go to the All In podcast, which is, Jason does that with them and Friedberg. It's episode number 50, because I just had to listen to it the other day, so that's why I remember the number. So it's episode number 50 on the All In podcast. If people are interested.
yeah, one of the best podcasts out there, easily. Oh, by the way, because a lot of people don't know this too. I mean, people might be surprised that Jason's hosting the one of the top podcasts, and when I say one of the top podcasts, I mean literally. Like, they're regularly in the top 10 or 20 of all podcasts, not just tech podcasts, all podcasts, and let alone tech. Almost certainly must be the top tech podcast. But the Jason's was one of the first podcasters. Period. Back in the OG days, when nobody knew what a podcast was. They weren't even. It was way before the iPod.
It was him and Tom Green. That was those are the only people doing podcasts.
No, I would say Jason predated Tom Green by nearly a decade.
Oh,
So there was Podio, or what was Harris's company called out of New York? God, what did he call that? It's in the documentary We Live in Public. Josh Harris had a company of streaming audio over the internet, and he was doing little radio shows at the time. They didn't even think to call them podcasts, but they were live.
You talking about,
Hmm?
you talking about broadcast.com from Mark Cuban, or?
Before.
Oh.
I want to say it's called Podio, and it was Josh Harris couldn't afford to have a radio station or whatever, but knew enough geekery to rig up a live streaming over the internet first before anyone could, technically figure out how to do that stuff, and was making little, the default was, well, let's pretend like we're, have a little radio show. And that's how Jason and Josh were friends back then. This is, I want to say 96, something like that. Just for context, so this is, and then Jason and I started the This Week in Startups podcast together at his house. And in fact, it was called the Calacanis Cast for the first 13 episodes. And then it was rebranded This Week in Startups, much to the chagrin of Leo Laporte, who was doing This Week in Tech. And there was a big brouhaha. If you were around back then, you remember. Anyway, I digress. But which, by the way, This Week in Startups we did the 1000th episode in December. It's coming up on, if anyone's a This Week in Startups fan, let me know what episode it's on now. It's probably going to hit 2000 before too long. Anyway, the next is Samsung is considering building 11 new chip-making facilities in the Austin area. That's a lot of chip-making facilities in one area. 11 chip-making facilities in the Austin area over the next 2 decades, which could lead to $192 billion in new investment. That sounds almost too big to be true.
But who's starting them, Tyler?
Samsung. Some guy named Sam Sung is going to build 11 new chip-making facilities in the Austin area over the next 20 years. Next up,
Isn't that good news? Because that reduces our reliance on China, Taiwan, anywhere else.
It's great news for America, and it's, again, the next paragraph in the never-ending news story of deglobalization.
Yeah, but Tyler, it's also the question there. Also, technically, though, is do we have the capability to bring all of that back? So it is an attempt to decouple, but I mean that is the big question: is what capability do we have to make that happen?
Oh, we have all the capabilities given the Gigafactory huge success, bringing it from China over here. I mean, we are not short of any resources or talent.
Okay. Blockchain.com says it will cut 25% of its workforce. Oh my God, are people cutting workforces? Are tech company cutting workforces? Jesus Christ, with this nonsense. Just let's do stories of tech companies that aren't cutting the weak team members. Can we do that story? I would love to see that story.
Did you guys, did you, on this subject, not to add of note, but did the Invite one come up on the list earlier? Sorry, I was kind of
Say
off and
again?
on for a little bit there.
LLC.
Invite, the commuter, the genetics, sorry. The genetics and genomics company, Invite,
No.
1,000 people yesterday.
Okay, they cut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Announced the new CEO on Monday, and 1,000. Only because we have friends and colleagues in the space, a couple of which were part of the cutbacks, and very, very senior level people. So yeah, it's it's sad when 5 people get laid off. It's really sad when 1,000 people get laid off in one sweep.
Sure.
So the other thing I was going to mention on that last story was that I was just in Wales for a month with our pediatric medical device company is embedded in the university there, and we have a chip-based sensor technology, and we've been sort of keeping a close eye on new sort of semiconductor development, and Wales actually has a really strong presence already, and they're expanding by 6-fold in the next 18 months their chip production capacity in Wales, like new facilities spun out of the large semiconductor plant that they already have in Wales. So I think this is something that's happening in a number of places across Europe, and probably will be even more so in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Next up, Lyft closes its car rental service. I didn't even know they had a car rental service, which was running in 5 locations. Okay, well, that's why I had no idea. But will still offer third-party rentals in more than 30 locations as it lays off 60 employees. The company is the latest to cut back on staff. And no, we just had one 5 fucking seconds ago. It was blockchain.com. Can we please stop with this? Just totally ridiculous. Let's do headlines of every single company, and this is all of them. They're all cutting the weak team members right now, all of them. So we're going to write every headline separately. Samsung says it sold nearly 10 million Fold 3 and Flip 3 devices. Who cares? Next, Text Expander, which lets users create customized shortcuts. You know the app. Raises $41 million in its first ever fundraising since launching in 2007. Microsoft is eliminating many job listings, including in its Azure and security units, but plans to honor job offers and make exceptions for critical roles. And a chip teardown shows that China's SMIC is quietly shipping 7-nanometer chips. SMIC is rapidly approaching the world's third largest foundry behind TSMC and Samsung. 15.5, which builds HR software used at Spotify, Credit Karma, and other companies, has raised $52 million Series C, led by Quad Partners. 15.5, an early mover in the world of building technology to help motivate teams and to improve performance management for execs overseas those teams. Now, this is going to be funny. I know this, but I just want to double, triple dog check this. Hold on. I know the founder of 15.5 because remember I was just talking about Jason Calacanis and the startup conference where they get to pitch for free to all of the investors at no cost whatsoever. Remember that?
Yes, yes.
Right. I was just ranting about that 5-10 minutes ago. So 15.5, if I remember correctly, and I think I do, launched at the launch conference. In what year? I don't know, around 2010 or 11. We could look up their founding date on Wikipedia or whatever. That will probably give a clue. And I recall Jason invested in them, and my memory could be wrong, but I believe he did. As a result of that, during that time, I remember them coming by our office separately to discuss that. I remember Jason really liking this startup. This would have been around 2009 or 10, probably 10. Anyway, so they're funny enough. We were just talking about the launch conference and Jason and the awesome, cool shit he's done for startup culture generally. And here's a startup in one of 3 headlines later, 15.5, which was part of those conferences and just raised $52 million. There you go. Google says it will pause hiring for 2 weeks, except for offers that have already been made. Well, Jesus, that was the last article we just read from Microsoft, is essentially doing the same. After saying last week it would slow hiring for the rest of 2022. Yeah, okay, right. So the big the top big 5 tech companies are trying to not lay people off because God knows they have more money than many countries. So they don't really need to lay people off, and so they don't because they can afford not to. They're not startups anymore either. They have
But
economies bigger.
why is pausing for 2 weeks newsworthy at all?
Yeah, fair point. And not they're not freezing all. Just they're not freezing offers that were already made. They're honoring those. So anyway,
Maybe can be extended unlimitedly, just like in the beginning of Shanghai, just 5 days, then 2 months.
okay, so check out this next one. I love this next one. It's from Bloomberg. It says new, like it's brand new news. It's new news, unlike that old news. Stockholm-based Normative, whose software helps companies accurately measure their carbon footprints, raises $31 million. Boom. Hello, Stockholm. How are we doing today? Boom. I love that headline. Why? Because I'm doing a conference in September all about trying to get startups to give a fuck about exactly this issue. Because God knows we have enough dog walking apps and photo sharing apps and whatnot. And we need more apps like that that'll help companies measure their carbon footprints and take actions against it. That's a real
Okay,
problem.
Tyler,
Yes.
I'd love to introduce you to somebody who's been running something called the Impact-A-Thon, and it's all about um, pitching companies that are startups that are all about impact. Um, fabulous things like just really whether it's cleaning up the ocean and or technologies that are really just doing anything and everything to help the environment or making it's all aligned with the World Economic Forum's, what is it, the 15 or 20, they're 20. I always screw this up when I talk about it, but anyways, I'd love to sort of send you the information in the back channel.
Cool, please do. I realize now that I have met the founder from Normative, and I believe he pitched on one of my monthly events. I'm just checking my own notes because I'm going to have to ping him to invite him to pitch at the September event where we're going to be doing a big, deep, really going deep into this whole topic of startups for good, for making an impact and giving a shit, and trying to change the culture of startups once again, and trying to make sure we all start holding up each other accountable, that we're actually building shit that actually matters. So, yeah, kudos to Normative and the team there. $31 million. Awesome. And then, what else do we got here today? Warner Music Group becomes the first major label to adopt SoundCloud's user-centric payouts instead of the pro rata model used by Spotify. About 3 months after, and by the way, both of those companies, Spotify and SoundCloud, are both founded by Swedes, not surprisingly. There's a very good reason for that, actually. I'll save that story for another time. But yeah, interesting to see that change. SoundCloud officially inked a global licensing deal with Warner Music Group. Meta's research published internally in February reveals that Facebook's challenges in India, including that women are shunning it due to safety concerns and more. New York Times reporting that a game called War of Heroes, which is from Myanmar-born developers, lets opponents of the country's military coup kill virtual soldiers and raise money for real-life resistance. Oh, wow. Holy wow. Opponents of the coup, because here's what happened, is Myanmar had a democratically elected government, and that government was shutting down China's infrastructure projects, like its oil pipelines, and so China paid the military to come do a military coup, and that's what you have today. And the locals know it, and the locals hate it, because they don't like being under control, having their own little mini CCP going on there, as you can imagine. And CCP funded mini CCP. So, and they're killing the locals. The army, the Burmese army is killing the Burmese people, very sadly, who resist. So, in fact, they just bombed a village just a week ago. So, this is a really interesting. Talking about, I was just criticizing making video games that we don't need anymore, but boy, is this a really bizarrely clever twist on that whole theme. They made a game that lets the players who identify as being opposed to the military coup, and in the game you kill virtual soldiers of the military coup, and raise money for real life resistance, meaning the rebels, meaning the Burmese people who are resisting against the military coup. That's
They
wild.
should have done something like America's Army, where you can play both sides as opposing force, but you would always see the other side as always being the enemy, always seeing terrorists, regarding of whether you have played assault or defense. Because I don't think this game is going to be available there. So, unfortunately, if they had just made a slight change in the story, perhaps it would have been more palatable on that marketplace. But I suspect it's not going to be.
That's wild. So the next is Meta and Google's content rules are restrictive for many abortion rights groups worldwide, while abortion ads on Google aren't permitted in dozens of countries. Poland's biggest protests since the fall of communism broke out in October 2020 after a court decision rendered nearly all abortions in the country illegal. And tech is in the middle of that. Any big ad networks are going to be in the middle of that. Google's the world's biggest ad network, so they're kind of caught in the middle of that. Okay. Reuters says they have sources that the United States is probing Huawei over concerns that gear in cell towers could capture sensitive information from military bases and missile silos and transmit it to China. Yeah, okay, if you haven't been following along, that's precisely why the US has been telling all of its allies and anyone that would listen to not buy Huawei's 5G transmitters and antennas. Because that shit's going to send data back to Beijing. Yes, we know it's cheaper than Ericsson, but you should buy Ericsson because they're not going to be sending your data anywhere. And Huawei will. And that whole 5G battle has huge future foreshadowing implications because the countries that go with Huawei essentially say, we don't care that China's stealing all of our data because we're going to be on Team China when shit hits the fan, when the whole marriage, when the divorce settles. Some of us are going with mommy, some of us are going with daddy. And the ones who go with Huawei are going with Uncle Xi, and the ones going with, not willing to use Huawei 5G are going to be on Team West, the liberal West versus the authoritarian East, if we want to oversimplify it. So, yeah, this headline that the U.S. is probing Huawei over concerns that gear in the cell phone towers capture sensitive data info from military bases and missile silos. Yeah, we've known that for years. That there's no need to probe. That baby's been put to bed.
I suspect they probably now have like an X-ray result or scan of one of the chips that's responsible for this. So there's probably some very conclusive, highly classified piece of evidence that we just don't want to say publicly. But like one thing to note though is some of these microchips, when you do try to X-ray them or do any sort of scanning, I think some recent advances have the chip dissolve if it hits a certain wavelength. So sometimes it can be quite difficult or challenging to see conclusively or show that legally.
Shanghai-based Jaka Robots, which makes collaborative industrial robots that work alongside humans, raises $150 million. And by work alongside humans, they mean for the time being. At some point, those humans have to go home and sleep, and the robots don't. Get it? You see how that plays out? And those humans probably want a lunch break, and they might even want a holiday. Those selfish bastards. And
Fuck those people.
Those robots, they don't really give a shit about holidays, it turns out. They're not really into New Year's Eve or Christmas or any of it.
Or sleeping or eating.
That whole sleeping and eating
Well,
thing.
but they do have to take that regular union mandated battery break.
Wireless charging. Boom.
No, that doesn't work.
Just shove the power cable right up its ass. Keep that thing charged up. Anyway, the next is that a U.S. House panel votes 53-2 to advance the American Data Privacy and Protection Act, which would affect ad targeting and how tech companies use people's data. Here comes heavy regulation to the best of politicians' abilities to regulate ad tech, something they know nothing about. It's going to be fun. And Roblox rolls out an update to make its materials look and act more lifelike, overhauling core aspects of the visual toolkit that developers use to make games. So here comes the metaverse in Roblox. And VCs invested about $16 billion in the US in Series A and B rounds in Q2. That's pretty good for one quarter, $16 billion. But it's not as good as last year because that's down 22%. The biggest decline in early stage funding since 2010. Volkswagen software unit partners with STM Microelectronics to co-develop semiconductors. They want to in-house that shit, no doubt. The new Google Wallet.
Tyler, was there any mention of how the, I guess, categories or classes of investments changed? Because I suspect probably biotech and crypto startups are maybe less less on the sheet now than they were before?
Cheryl can pin it so you can read it. I haven't read it.
Okay, thank you.
The new Google Wallet rolls out to all users with Android 5.2 available as a separate app in the United States and Singapore, and as a Google Pay update for others. Next, WhatsApp rolls out chat migration from Android to iOS, and vice versa for all users. There you go, WhatsApp. You did it. You're only the biggest fucking chat app outside of China. And now we can transmit our, and people who have an Android and buy an iPhone or vice versa can now take that data along with them as they change phones. Thank God it only took, Jesus, it's only 2022. So Dan Wright, CEO of enterprise AI startup Data Robot, resigns, and Reddit's brand safety approach to monetization is cautious, labeling all subreddits as no ads until a manual human review applies. That's cool. So they're going tiptoeing into monetization over there in Reddit land, but once they get that right, that thing's going to be a powder keg of money going on over there. That's going to be, they have so much, that is such a massive opportunity financially going on over there at Reddit. All those people that are connected into communities on every topic you could ever imagine. It's truly amazing how valuable that can be. And they have not really monetizing it at all today, and that, holy cow, is that a monetizable asset. Anyway, an interview with Alexa Smart Home Director on how embracing the Matter standard can help Amazon realize its vision of ambient intelligence. Okay, let me fill in the blanks for you on that one. The new standard called Matter that every device manufacturer, think every smart lock, every smart kettle, every smart refrigerator, door opener, all the hardware manufacturers that are making smart devices have all agreed to make their stuff interoperable through this standard called Matter, M-A-T-T-E-R. And how then are you going to engage with all of your smart devices is likely to be through Google Assistant or Alexa or Siri. So Alexa loves this because now Alexa can work with all devices. So does Siri, so does Google Assistant. They love it most of all because they were previously competing in a land grab to see who could get the most devices. And Siri was losing its ass because they weren't able to get all of the hardware manufacturers to sign up to make their shit compatible with Apple HomeKit. But now all of the stuff is interoperable. So this interview happens to be with the Alexa director on how Matter is going to help Amazon realize its vision of ambient intelligence. Well, it's going to help all of the voice assistants realize their vision of ambient intelligence. It's going to make your home smart and your office smart and all that shit. It's quite a big breakthrough. So OpenAI makes DALL-E 2 widely available in beta through a credit-based fee structure. Users will get free credits every month and can buy more in $15 increments. So here comes DALL-E 2 for everybody. That's fantastic. Starting today, you will get full rights to commercialize the images you create with DALL-E 2 so long as you follow our content policy and terms. These rights include right to reprint, sell, and merchandise images. Oh, that's interesting. So they get a right to the images as well. That's interesting.
Because undoubtedly it's going to be used to make memes, so getting a cut of memes might be an interesting revenue.
Yeah, it's not that they get a cut. They get the right to the image themselves. And to be able to do, maybe they don't do anything with it, but maybe they do. The next is Microsoft tests Discord voice chat integration. That's Clubhouse, y'all. With select Xbox insiders, as PlayStation users wait for the deep Discord integration that Sony promised in 2021. Okay, those are your big boring stories for today. And now we do the tweets. Are we ready for the tweets? We are. I believe who did this first one. Multiple people sent in this one. I think Heyman in Toronto was one of the people who sent this one in. That Britain blocks Chinese companies' deal to acquire a camera technology as it could pose a risk to national security. University of Manchester has reached deal to license camera technology to Beijing Infinite Vision Technology. First time Britain's business secretary has used new national security powers to block the licensing deal because we can't risk China taking advances of any technological sort and then using that shit against us. Very interesting. Quote, there is a potential that the technology could be used to build defense or technological capabilities which may present national security risks to the United Kingdom. Those risks would arise on the transfer of the intellectual property to the acquirer. So China, you cannot buy our shit no more. We are taking our ball and we are going elsewhere with our friends. And no, you cannot buy any of our balls to play with your friends. Do you see how this is going? Is that hopefully that metaphor makes it perfectly clear?
So maybe it's perhaps so powerful of a technology that not even the great 007 could thwart it, so they have to block it.
But this is going to be the big thing. Oh, by the way, and the article mentions it. Good. Hey, kudos, journalist. They talk the whole big brouhaha in the Netherlands about the lens maker that we're basically blocking any company that makes technologies that China could use that we don't want them to have. The US and the UK, everybody, the whole West is going to be like, nope, can't sell that to China. Nope, can't sell that to China. Nope, fuck those dudes. Don't sell it to them. You can't sell that shit to them. Because every time they get anything of any value, they're hell-bent on destroying us. So we don't want them to have any new technologies of any kind. So F them. It's a bitter breakup. It's a bitter divorce. It's a bad marriage, and we want out. And we're going back. We're going home. And we're taking all of our stuff and all of our friends, and we're out. Peace. Peace out. And no, you can't take me out for dinner. No, not at all. No, I'm not interested in meeting you at the cafe to discuss whatever. No, 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 no. It's done. We're done with you. We brought you into this world economically, and now we're done with you. It was nice. We tried. We thought it would go well. We were hoping for the best.
Well, admittedly, it did go well for China, just maybe not so well for the rest of us.
Well, it went well for a lot of the wealthy folks in the West did pretty well on there, and those who knew how to play the game did very well. Anywho, just a little oversimplification there. So the next is a mouse study shows that dopamine released in the brain in response to hydration. A team of researchers from UC San Francisco and elsewhere figures out that your brain releases dopamine when you hydrate. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I assume I'm reading that one correctly. The next is Ford, the car company, is testing robot EV chargers to help disabled drivers. But let's be honest, shall we? We're all going to be using that robotic EV charger while we sit in our car on TikTok while our car recharges. So basically, currently, if you're an EV owner, you know very well, you go to an EV charging station, you have to, heaven forbid, get out of your car. Can you believe it? This is truly unbelievable torture. And reach your arm. You have to literally put your phone in your pocket and stop the TikTok. I know this sounds like torture. And grab the handle of the charger and plug it into your car. And before the car can charge. And that's just a bridge too far, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there should be laws against this kind of absolutely. These are human rights violations, right? So thankfully, Ford is testing a robot that can put that cable into your car for you. And they say it's to help disabled drivers, but you and I know who's really going to use that, do we not? You lazy sack of you know what? You're going to sit in your car and you're going to want that robotic. By the way, the robotic arm barely costs anything. And if it's available, you know you're going to use it. You know you're going to use it. We all know we're going to use that. We all
You need
know.
They're
music.
going to have to integrate this with Apple Play or and Google Play so that we truly don't have to get out of our cars, right?
Your car is going to pull up to the, but by the way, what the bigger picture is, at some point the car is going to drive itself to this thing. You're going to be asleep, or you might not even be in the damn car, and the autonomous vehicles are now going to be able to recharge themselves. But why they don't mention that as the lead of that's the bigger story here, is the cars are now, and the charging stations, the autonomous cars can now charge themselves at the charging stations. That's the bigger, huger implication. The headline that this is to help disabled drivers. Hang on, are you missing the bigger picture here? The bigger picture here is no disrespect to disabled drivers, love ya, but autonomous cars being able to charge themselves, that's a holy shit, holy cow moment. Same exact technology, identical technology. It's the port reaches over and plugs itself into your car. Well, when you have an autonomous vehicle,
Hey, Tyler, this is Jennifer
yeah,
speaking. That is
hey,
absolutely completely freaky. That, I mean, the big picture is, sorry, because I had friends who were at MIT working on the first generation of like self-driving cars before,
yeah.
but means like our own autonomy is being threatened by the fact that the car can literally go and just charge itself, is what you're just saying, and my mind is completely blown.
Right, but
I think it's going.
why the journalists didn't recognize this for what it really is, and
Yeah.
yeah, hold on. Do you think the person who's spending nights and weekends away from their family for the next 5 years to build this is thinking, I'm really doing this for the disabled drivers, or he's thinking, holy shit, every it's for everybody, autonomous car or not. It applies to
Yeah, of
100%.
course.
Right.
I had a friend at Google who left for that reason because she was like, "Oh my God, it's like the end of the world." She like left 6 years ago when they were already doing the robotic arms and everything, just machine learning and packing faster and faster and faster. And now people who've also stayed. This guy who was working on the autonomous cars worked on it more than 15 years ago. But what I'm trying to say is like, I hear that and I'm like, holy shit. It's not just obviously for people who are disabled. I have a family member who sadly is qualifying for that soon, but it is, the ramifications of this are that like, whenever that car or that arm or whoever is controlling the underpinnings of the AI feels like it will go to that charging station, and maybe even the charge will be free as long as you have to like listen to some ad or something, and it will charge your car for you whether you want it to or not.
Oh, I
This
like what
chart
you're
brought to you by General Motors. Thank you for choosing
Exactly.
your Tesla or maybe GM next time. Thanks.
Yeah, and I can't believe that the journalists are not commenting. I'm reading some of the coverage that you just mentioned right now, but they're not commenting on the broader sort of, ramifications of that. Thank you for kind of pointing that out again for all of us.
teens. The BBC reporting that teens turning to TikTok and Instagram for news. Yeah, that was a study that we covered earlier. And now NASA shares video of Neil Armstrong's footprints visible on the surface of the moon. NASA shared video showing the footprints of Neil Armstrong on the surface of the moon.
Take that, conspiracy theorists.
Deepfake. Hashtag deepfake.
So wait a second. Speaking of deepfakes, did anybody see the headline about Antarctica? Was it, and that the images that people have been sharing aren't real? They're from like 2007, and they're extrapolated from simply because the imagery that normally comes from space is covered in clouds, and so they've extrapolated that imagery, and they're trying to figure out like exactly what imagery or what the actual images are of the landmass. I should find the article.
Oh, I thought you were going to say where the reptilians were hiding, but sounds much more reasonable.
No, this was something that came out yesterday. I have to find it.
Okay. The next tweet is from Saudamini that anyone can now share clips from Twitter Spaces on Android and iOS. Anyone in a Twitter space, which is Twitter's carbon copy clone of Clubhouse, can make clips, just like we do in Clubhouse. But the clips expire after 30 days. And now they're rolling it out. And the next is that Tesla, a judge has ruled that a crash that killed 2 teens, that Tesla is responsible, but only for 1%. The verdict placed 90% of the blame on the driver, 9% on the driver's father, and 1% on Tesla for the crash.
That sounds
And
about right, like life in general.
the next one is Apple Watch saves another life. It detects horrific killer tumor in a woman. It saved the user's life by detecting a rare life-threatening tumor called myeloma. There you go. The UAE to build satellites, land on an asteroid, and explore Venus and more, with plans to explore Venus within 7 years and land on an asteroid, in addition to launching a spacecraft into Martian orbit. The UAE is getting ready for space. And China's Baidu, their version of Google, unveils Robo taxis with detachable steering wheel. The fully autonomous vehicle could hit the roads in China from next year, with the company's chief executive saying using a robo taxi will one day be half of the cars on the road. I wonder
Who would get into a car without a steering wheel, though? I
how
would not.
how will they charge themselves? So the next is from Pat from BBC that Biden unveils $2.3 billion plan to fight climate change. But he stops short of formally declaring a climate emergency despite pressure from fellow Democrats. Because words, it's all about the words to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. If we could only just utter the right words, we could somehow avoid catastrophe. Heaven forbid we all take action and responsibility. We got to get certain people to chant certain mouth utterances to save us. So the next one is that Americans, this is from Bloomberg, and thank you to the folks who sent this in. More Americans who can't afford homes are moving to Europe. Prohibitive housing prices, a strong dollar, and a political rancor have contributed to a wave of Americans relocating to Europe. Driven across the Atlantic by the rising cost of living, inflated housing prices, a surging dollar, and political rancor at home. Right. Okay, there. You did it. You figured it out. You figured out that you can't afford to live where you thought you could live. And then you realize, oh shit, there are other places to live. Holy cow, what a breakthrough. You did it. You broke through the cognitive barrier that there's more than one city on the fucking planet. Well done. You figured it out. Holy cow. How did you do it? By the way, the next step, you'll come to realize there's this part of the world called Asia, where it's even cheaper. You think Europe's cheaper than the US? Wait till you find out about this hot new place called Asia, where it gets real cheap and the weather's a lot better, and we've got a lot of our own energy and a lot of our own food. And let me tell you
Well,
something.
actually, I talked with people that they're moving away from Asia to Portugal mainly.
I can assure you there's more
Lately,
people.
Americans.
I can assure you there's a lot more people moving from Europe to Asia in the near future.
Not with China. Even my cousin moved away from Asia
Well,
now.
I can explain that to you. It's because Portugal gives away passports like toilet paper, and Chinese people want European passports, and they're willing to buy them. In Portugal, I love Portugal. I would live in Portugal myself if it wasn't 40 fucking degrees there. and going to run out of water in my lifetime. It's not going to be habitable.
Not in the north. That's not true for North or Madeira or the Azores. Like,
Right.
that's just South Portugal.
Yeah,
That's very different in the
the
north.
whole
And the
bottom
Atlantic
where
Ocean
everyone
is
lives. Yeah, I
70
get that.
degrees
Yeah,
Celsius.
I'm well aware. However, I'm not interested in living in places that are going to be a struggle to live in and border with across the Straits of Gibraltar with a whole lot of future climate refugees that are likely to hop over the Strait of Gibraltar. That's a whole big no thank you as far as I'm
That's
concerned.
Spain. That's not Portugal. And
I
no,
know,
Portugal will not
Jesus
run
Christ.
out of water
Oh
at
my
any
God.
time soon.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. So, the Chinese are Portugal sells passports, and they sell a lot of those passports to China because Chinese people would love to have EU based passports, and they can buy them in Portugal, and they do. So you have a whole bunch of Chinese people with
That's
Portugal
not
passports.
true. Also, they are bound by EU laws. They cannot sell passports. That's not true. What they are doing is giving tax initiatives to high-income people from abroad, especially tech. What Portugal is giving away passports to is previous Jewish people that had to flee Portugal. If you can show that your family was originally from Portugal, you can get a passport.
That too.
And Portugal is a little bit more was used to be more flexible to previous colonies, but they had to stop. It was imposed by the EU to stop giving passports easier to previous colony members.
European residency through real estate investment.
Correct.
Oh, like in New York in the US, you get a green card for like 100,000 K.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it
I
was meant.
just read that you can obtain residency through investing in Portugal and then apply for citizenship in 5 years.
Tax free.
Yeah. How did Tom Hanks get that fancy passport of his, right? So it's all about investment.
And it's not just Portugal. Lots of European countries have visa and passport things like that too, including Malta.
I could talk about I could do a room on this for a week nonstop. Don't make me do
But
it.
Tyler, you forget one sales pitch point for Thailand, though, in that it's been many, many, many years now that a lot of Europeans have been moving to Thailand, maybe not being able to get citizenship, but certainly there's a visa they can also get to stay there, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And one of the important features is that not only the weather's good and all of that, and life is cheap and so on and so forth, food's good, but the medical care is excellent. The opportunity to
Thailand,
receive
well,
attention while you're elderly is fantastic too.
ranked eighth in
Yeah,
the
plus
world for
I know.
medical, probably in the top three for geriatric medical care. Yes.
I would say proximity to China is also a huge factor because I think if you're especially operating in that kind of business investment environment, that's definitely a plus right there.
Okay. So, oh, by the way, then I didn't pick you. It's sitting in my open tab while I was not paying attention. The next headline is, I'll pin it to the room. Thailand admits now, the government is admitting that they've used surveillance to spy on democracy activists. Remember the story about Pegasus in Thailand? That was going back months ago. And then there was a recent update on that story that there was more than was assumed because the outfit in Toronto had said, oh, we know of at least 30, even though only 5 had come forward to say that their phones had been exploited with Pegasus. We know of at least 30. So that means there was 25 who didn't come forward. And then initially, the government didn't comment or said they don't. Somebody in the government said they don't, although that person probably wasn't aware. And now, less than a day after police denied, the police didn't know. The police denied using, and it probably wasn't the police who did it, by the way. Less than a day after police denied using the Israeli-made Pegasus spyware to track Thai democracy activists, a government minister admitted Thailand does use surveillance to monitor individuals. Oh, well, That's putting it mildly. They're doing facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, cell phone tracking, and a whole myriad of other things to track and do surveillance and monitor individuals. So that's putting it mildly. That doesn't necessarily admit that they're using Pegasus. He's just admitting that Thailand does use surveillance of all kinds, a whole cornucopia of different ways that they do surveillance to monitor individuals in the land of smiles. Successive Thai governments have been accused by human rights groups of using broad definitions of national security as a pretext to prosecute or suppress the activities of their main rivals. And on Monday, a joint investigation by Thai human rights group and Citizen Lab revealed the Thai government had used Pegasus spyware on about 30 government critics. The report makes it known that Pegasus spyware was found on the phones of leading Thai protest organizers. In Parliament, Minister of Digital Economy confessed the kingdom did use surveillance software to track individuals in cases involving national security or drugs. Right. That doesn't necessarily mean Pegasus, by the way. He did not name the controversial Israeli spyware Pegasus, but admitted he was aware of spyware being used to listen into or access a mobile phone to view the screen, monitor conversations and messages. Astonishingly, the government minister acknowledged it would be unlawful to use such software, but didn't reveal which government agency does. Quote, "It is used on national security or drug matters. If you need to arrest a drug dealer, you have to listen in to find where the drop would be. I understand that there was usage of this sort, but it is very limited and only in special cases." In the past, the government has denied the accusation, as did the police. The Thai police spokesperson yesterday said that while the police is bound by duty to prevent crimes and maintain peace and order and national security, always comply with the law and carry out all their work within the confines of what is legal, so they never use spyware to monitor protests, online activity, or funding resources. The police, that's not their prerogative either. That would go under a different government agency at the national level. No doubt this story would continue to run for that. Anyway, so that's the update. And that takes me to the end of the tweets. Did anyone else have a tweet that they want to share since we met last time? I think
The monkeypox meets COVID for a super pandemic tweet by a famous, I guess, Twitter doctor. So that one's kind of more of a joke, but also kind of non-zero probability of happening. So that was kind of interesting.
and Katerina found scientists have created genetically modified drought-resistant plants, and not only drought-resistant, but saltwater friendly is a. It's not mentioned in this article, I don't think, but that's one of the amazing aspects of genetically modifying plants is we're going to have a whole lot less water in a lot of areas, and we're still going to need food. So you're going to need GMOs, whether you know it or not. And all the rest of the tweets appear to be replicants.
Shout out to AGRISEA for doing just that, genetically modifying plants to be more tolerant of salt water. So kudos to them.
Yeah, that's hot stuff. Okay, so there we
Can
go.
you share this one by Johan? Robot dog not so cute with submarine gun strapped to the back.
I didn't. A lot of people there's a whole lot of different headlines about that video of what we knew would come very quickly, which is the robotic dog framework or design would inevitably, have machine guns strapped to them and used in exactly this context. I mean, anyone who ever saw the robot dog knew this was an inevitable reality, and here it is. There's now video of it, and it raises all kinds of interesting questions, like why wouldn't we use that? If you were a Ukrainian, wouldn't you want to use that and save the lives of a lot of people? And then again, if you're a Ukrainian, wouldn't you be scared out of your wits if you saw those things marching towards your capital? Once you get into robots fighting, I mean, we talk about robots replacing humans all the time, but once you get robots replacing soldiers, holy shit, does that get scary, because you just can create an army of them to attack, oh, I don't know, Taiwan, for example. So, yeah, you can bet your last dollar that China dreams about that every night when they go to sleep. So,
Although they don't buy armor for their soldiers because they feel like then they fight more carelessly. So it's hard to say what level of commitment or investment they would pose. I think it's more of a thing for Japan, because Japan is, I think, known for their Sony Aibo robots. So I see a bunch of those robots rushing you on the field like a bunch of zombies, but each one has a grenade strapped to it. That might be an interesting proposition there.
there we go. Okay, so thank you for sharing that, Cheryl, and we'll catch you all again. Manana, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful